Hi there, it's Jeff. I've recently finished this bedside table project made with manufactured board using soft close concealed runners, which you can see in one of my other videos. So if you're interested in watching this project from start to finish, sit back and enjoy, and I'll catch you at the end of the video.
Okay, before I cut my material out, I make some cutting plans, and you can see that me making those cutting plans and using that program in one of my previous videos. I'm measuring and marking out to cut the outside frame of this bedside table, which will be mitered all round. So the idea here is to get to cut it along its length, and we want that grain to flow, book matched, to be right round the cabinet around those miters. So yeah, I'm just basically using my track saw to cut this sheet into manageable pieces, and then I take those smaller pieces like that over to my cabinet saw and then cut them to more precise measurements using that. And that's just how I cut and do things in my little workshop, but it works for me. You'll see me putting a length of masking tape along this section of board here, and I'm marking it. This is basically going to be my sides and my top of the cabinet, and it'll make more sense once I cut this up into sections, but this is so I can keep track of where those pieces will go back together once they have the miters done, so the grain actually will line up. Next, I'm going to edge that front of that board before I cut it on the saw. It just makes it a lot easier to do that now. And you'll see me using this automatic edge banding machine. You can actually see this in more detail in one of my other previous videos on edging melamine. I show how to do the edging with this machine, but I also show in that video how to edge if you don't have one of these machines, and you can do it by hand. But the process is basically the same when I'm actually trimming and cleaning this edging up. Now I'm going to dock my sides and top to length, but I'm going to leave it a little bit oversize, and then I will come back to the saw and set it up at 45 degrees and cut my miters. Here you can see me marking my top and my sides with A and B, just so I know how they go back together. Here you'll see me in this process cutting my miters at 45 degrees. I run one end first through the saw using the fence, and then I will measure and mark the external length that I want these pieces cut at, and then slowly offer it up to the saw, to the blade, and just cut it to exact markings. And then I've just laid it out on the bench here in the position that each piece will go. The next process will be putting this frame together and gluing it all up. So to begin with, I've got a nice straight edge that I will put all my pieces hard up against, and that's really important part of this process. You've got to make sure that all these pieces that you want to miter up together, they need to be hard up against a straight edge, so you get the flush joints on the front. And that's just me putting those together in sequence. And then I will use some masking tape and mask those joints together. You need to do it right along the miter joint. This is the outside face, by the way. Once I have marked all this up, I will flip the whole lot over, which you'll see in the next process with the gluing. For the bottom of this unit, I haven't used a full piece of board just to save on material. I've just done 2 strips, especially the back one is just a bit of white offcut because you don't see it. Okay, here you'll see me applying some glue into my miters and just spreading it along that joint. And then I will start folding each component up and using masking tape to complete that fold and get it nice and square. Once the frame's all wrapped up, you can check it with a tape measure diagonally. Just make sure you've got the same equal measurement. And you'll see on the pictures here with the grain how it matches, and that extra detail that you get by doing it in this method. Next, I'm just going to be doing the kick base, which is in a similar method with the miters, but I've also just put a couple of cleats there, front and back, and I've just used pocket holes, and that helps for something to screw down into from this base.
Okay, I've just stopped to show you what stage we're up to at the moment. So we've just put together all our outside frame in the nice grain material. It's all been mitered. I've screwed on the bottom plinth. And now we're up to the next stage, which is going to be making the inside carcass or inside frame that's going to take the runners and the drawers. I'm going to be doing that out of black laminate, which you can see behind me. It's just instead of white melamine board, it's just black. But before I'm going to be doing that, I'm going to be adding an extra detailed feature, which is going to be, it's just this, I've just pre-prepared this bit of 3mm MDF. I've undercoated and I've sprayed it in a gold paint. And that's going to be mitered as well. It's going to be cut and mitered to sit on the inside of this carcass first, and then the other frame will be sitting inside it. So this is going to be like a little edge that you're going to see on the inside here. All you're really going to see is pretty much that little 3mm gold edge, and maybe when you open up the drawers you might see 16mm of it. So that's going to be my next step, is cutting these to suit the internal measurements, mitering them all the way around. I've pre-prepared some of those all the way around, and that'll be the next step, screwing those in. After that we'll be cutting the internals for the drawer cabinet. I'm going to be using these concealed runners this time. There's a slightly different drawer construction. So yeah, this is going to be good fun, installing these runners. So let's get on to the next step.
Okay, in this process here, I'm just using a laser distance measure to measure the internal dimensions of the cabinet. And I wrote them down there, and I'll transfer those measurements to that MDF strip and then cut the miters and cut these pieces to suit the internal measurements. Once you do cut these, you just want to trial them on the piece there, as you can see in the video, and you want them to be a really nice snug fit. You don't want them to be too loose, otherwise those miters will have gaps in them. If you find that the measurements for your top and bottom are equal, you can cut one side and then measure the length of it, like I'm doing here, and then they'll be the same distance. Once you've cut them and you've fitted them in position, then just using some little 5/8 screws just to screw them down, just to hold them. You could use a little bit of glue as well, but I don't think there's any need to, because the inside carcass pieces are going to be sitting on top of this again and screwed also. So after this process is done, you'll need to do another piece of MDF the same thickness and apply that to the back pieces as well. So when I do put my internal carcass pieces, they'll sit level, but they don't need to be painted or anything because they're not seen, so you'll just see them in raw MDF.
Okay, this is starting to take shape. I've just slipped in the two sides, made them to suit. I've cut the bottom and I've pre-done some pocket holes in them so we can screw them in, and the same as top rails that are going to go in at the front and back. And I've still got to measure and mark, cut out the back for this, but I'm going to do it in situ once the bottom's in, and put the top rails in as well. Now, this is one way of doing it. The other method you could do is probably try to make this internal carcass and try to slide it in, but I just found that's a little bit tedious, and you know, if your things are a little bit out of square, or so I'm just with this one I'm demonstrating how that you can actually build your inside carcass in situ while this has been made. So using the pocket holes, it's achievable. So the next step, before I actually screw these in, I'm going to pull these sides back out, and I'm going to pre-drill and screw on my runners. So to save doing it while it's in position, it's just easy to do it flat on the bench. So I'm going to measure and mark those out, and they are according to my plans. And it depends on what runners that you use. I'm using this concealed runners, which are from Hafele. They've got specifications the same, they're pretty much all the same, 37 from the front, but your heights is going to depend on what size drawers that you're using. So next step, pull these back out, put the runners on, then I'm going to put it back in position and screw it all in place, and then it's time for to make the drawer boxes. So let's get to it.
Next, I'll be installing my runners, and they will be screwed onto the inside carcass for this frame. And I've chosen concealed runners. They're by Hafele. I've chosen these because they are hidden. They're hidden underneath the drawer, which you'll see once we get moving along. And I've actually done a dedicated video on these runners, installing these runners and making the drawer boxes to suit if you're interested.
Okay, I've got to this stage where I've just slipped these in. I've only put the top runners in at this stage. I've left the bottom ones out so I can actually slip the bottom in. Once I do that, then I will screw off the bottom because the pocket holes are on the facing down, and then I'll put the runners back in, and then I'll I'll cut up the back for this job and put the top rails in.
Okay, so you'll see me slipping in the bottom, which is part of the carcass here. And it's important to get all your front edges nice and flush and level, because your drawer front is going to be sitting up against that or stopping up against it. So you see me using a bit of an offcut here just to get that distance correct to my front edge. And I'm just using an offcut there, which is 16mm, the same thickness as my drawer front. Once you're happy with that, you clamp it and screw it all into position, including my bottom here, which are those pocket holes. And then I will screw the bottom drawer runner back into position. Next process here, I'm just slipping in the back component, and that was made just using the same method. I measured with a laser distance measurer, cut it to size, and I've just used some pocket holes there, and that will be just placed in, made it flush at the back, and then just screwed off. Okay, now that I've installed my runners, it's time to make the drawer boxes to suit. And here, it's a similar process when I'm cutting. I'm just, same deal, I'm just using the track saw, measuring and marking. I'm actually docking off the board into 450mm pieces, but I actually allow 10mm oversize, and again I'll trim them to exact size on the cabinet saw and make those components up. I've cut all my sides and ends and the bottom for my drawers, and now it's time to edge those sides and the ends just on the top edge. I've also going to be edging the bottom of my sides. It's just an extra bit of a detail that you don't need to do, but I'm going to be doing that as well. But the same process in the edging here as I did before with my machine, except the machine is in a table there. In this next process here, I'm just running all my sides through. This is to make a rebate, the thickness of my board, 16 millimeters, into the side, which will be for my bottom to sit into. And it's only going to be at a small depth, around about 6 millimeters or 1/4 inch. And you'll see this in detail once we start putting the drawer boxes together. This process does take a little bit of a time because I'm having to make a pass with the saw and then move the fence over 3 millimeters at a time, which is the thickness of my blade, and eventually getting to the point where the board will actually slip into that rebate that I've just made. But if you've got a dado set for your saw, this probably can be done in one process. To help screw the drawer box together, I'm drilling some pocket holes in the ends of my drawer, so that's the front and the back. And as you'll see in the next process, when I screw this box together, you'll see how these pocket holes come in handy. Now when it comes to screwing my drawer box together, I like to clamp everything into place and clamp it nice and tight, especially with pocket holes, because when you go to screw these all together, you get your surfaces nice and flush, those ends, but with the aggressive angle on those pocket holes, it can tend to drift a little bit on you and it moves back a little bit. So by clamping it all down nice and tight, I find that it eliminates that. Next here, I'm slipping the drawer bottom into that rebate that I did, and then I'm clamping it down. I'm going to put a few screws on each end. Next step is to mount the drawer clips into place here. This is actually what holds the drawer box onto the runners with these front clips, and they're just a matter of screwing those into position on the ends there. And that again is actually with the manufacturer's specs. Next, you'll see me drilling a little hole at the back of the drawer, that 1/4 inch hole, and that's to accommodate for that back little tab that's on the runner, which is like a locator. Once you click it into place, it actually stops the back of the drawer flipping up. Next step here, I'm just pre-drilling some holes in the front of that drawer box so I can screw my drawer front on from the inside of that drawer. Next, I've got my drawer fronts and I'm measuring and marking, and I'm going to pre-drill the holes to bolt those handles in. And this is part of my process of fitting drawer fronts, especially if it's got handles. And you can actually see in more detail this process through one of my other videos on my channel on fitting drawer fronts, which is based on this project as well. You might be wondering what I'm doing here, drilling through my holes for my handle before I've fitted that drawer front on. But because I've got a fixed top there and I can't access that drawer front from the top to try and clamp it and screw it in, I'm drilling through the holes for that handle. I'm going to screw that handle on from the inside.
Okay, so I've just screwed on my handle on the top drawer front here, as you can see, and that basically will help me locate the drawer front. Tried to put the packers back as I was trying to do it, just pulling it out. But as you can see, with your gaps, I'm pretty much where I need to be there, but over here I can't put it in. So this end needs to lift up. So what I'll do is I'll open it up, undo the thread here, and just wiggle the drawer front up just a little bit, and then tighten that screw up a little. And it's just a little bit of backwards and forwards, loosening, tightening up these threads of the handle, because these are going to be your bit of play in trying to get this spot on. Once you are happy with the gaps, then we tighten this up, and then we will screw from the inside of the drawer and screw the drawer front on from the inside.
Last step here, I've just got a bit of matching edge tape turned upside down, and I'm sticking some double-sided tape on the back of that. And then I'm going to use a punch and make some of my own caps to cover those screws that I used on the inside of the drawers.
Well, there you have it, the finished product. I hope you enjoyed this little bedside table project. I just enjoyed doing something a little bit different this time, and just with a little bit more detail with the miters and the feature around the drawer. So hopefully I've inspired some people to have a go themselves, or even got some ideas out of this. It's all good. Thumbs up if you liked the video. Please subscribe and share if you liked it. And hopefully I'll see you in one of our next projects.